Hey y'all, wanted to record another one of these videos, going through a bunch of tabs. Just seen a bunch of things this last week that I wanted to make sure that everyone I know has the opportunity to see, because I think it's all very important stuff as we're moving forward and thinking about the trajectory of the rest of our lives. Uh, so I wanted to start with this post from Greta. She just wrote some cool ass words, so I wanted to go ahead and read through that and talk about also why it pertains to me so closely. Um, we'll give it a little sneak peek here. It's on this next tab, talking about Hurricane John. So right around the same time as Milton and Helene, John hit Acapulco, the same place that Otis hit last year, and left 127,000 people without a home you know? So you can go back and watch my video from last year talking about like why that's just so terrible and wrong that these people, who were not involved in the executive decisions made that ended up with this and that, you know, literally losing their homes um, because of the stuff. And, we've seen it here with Helene and Milton as well. Um, you know, it's not a coincidence that the ocean is this much warmer than it has been for a long time, and we're having these devastating events. Not even here in the Western world, but all over the globe, right? There was just one in Spain. There was one in Eastern Europe not too long ago. You know, um, we gotta get with the program about this being the world that we have been forced to live in by the people with consolidated wealth and power. And that is why I wanted to talk about all this stuff and start with this awesome post from Greta because she pretty much ties it up with a nice little bow. And if you don't watch the whole video, I totally get it. I know I yap for a little too long on these, but I would like to humbly request we all check out this at least. Um, so the post reads, "This year we have seen many defining elections all over the world. On November 5th, it is time for one of the most powerful countries in the world, the USA, to go to the polls. It is probably impossible to overestimate the consequences this specific election will have for the world and for the future of humanity. There is no doubt that one of the candidates, Trump, is way more dangerous than the other, but no matter if Trump or Harris wins, the USA, a country built on stolen land and genocide on indigenous people, will still be an imperialist, hyper-capitalist world power that will ultimately continue to lead the world further into a racist, unequal world with an ever-increasing, escalating climate and environmental emergency." Whoops. With this in mind, my main message to Americans is to remember that you cannot only settle for the least worst option. Democracy is not only every 4 years on election day, but also every hour of every day in between. You cannot think you have done enough only by voting, especially when both those candidates have blood on their hands. Let's not forget that the genocide in Palestine is happening under the Biden and Harris administration with American money and complicity. It is not in any way feminist, progressive, or humanitarian to bomb innocent children and civilians. It is the opposite, even if a woman is in charge. And this is, of course, one example among many of American imperialism. I cannot for my life understand how some can even pretend to talk about humanitarian values without even questioning their own role in further deepening global oppression and massacres of entire countries. So, Americans, you must do everything in your power to call out this extreme hypocrisy and the catastrophic consequences American imperialism has on a global scale. Be uncomfortable, fill the streets, block, organize, boycott, occupy, explicitly call out those in power whose actions and inaction lead to death and destruction. Join and support those who are resisting and leading the change. Nothing less will ever be acceptable. Um, yeah, goes hard. and kind of informs pretty much the entire rest of this little yap sesh. I did remember there was one more thing that I didn't open, and I'm trying to find it now. But it effectively was talking about, the stolen land and whatnot, and how, you know, we ought to just give it back and restore executive decision making power to people who are, not interested in massacring people at home and abroad with their policy. Um, Anyways, I guess we'll just start going through all the tabs. None of them are in any particular order. It's all just kind of a hodgepodge of stuff relating to this one post. So to start with, we have a post from Steven Donziger. Um, I think I've mentioned him in the past. Definitely check him and his story out. He's the lawyer who was basically persecuted by our government for trying to represent the indigenous people in Ecuador, as they tried to fight against Chevron. And yeah, so fascism's already here. A very blatant, cut and dry example right there. Uh, anyway, though, this one's actually some cool news. New York officials call for big oil to be prosecuted for fueling climate disasters. Um, I just wanted to mention this to everyone because it's like, some of that almost no-brainer approaches of stuff we could do like right now if we had the political will and pressure to create that political will. And that's why I'm always talking about organized labor and building dual power in our communities and working toward a general strike, because those methods are what will allow us to start and sustain efforts for pressure to getting policy that reflects stuff like this. Because that's the thing. These wealthy people have built up the system that requires our participation and pretty much complicity for it to even continue functioning. So, and makes sense. Our food is tied to it, our housing is tied to it, our healthcare is tied to it. But if we can start, generating pressure, then we could get policy that reflects stuff like this, having these people, big oil companies and whatnot, being held accountable, legally. I believe that is what has to happen if we, nice, if we even begin to, want to have a solution that isn't terrible. So, yeah, it's possible. It's always been possible. We can do it tomorrow if we were organized. And yeah, this one I wanted to mention too. It goes into tenant unions carrying out a rent strike. They just won 1.35 million in payouts for repairs. There's a lot of cool union efforts going on now related to jobs and renters. Pretty cool. So just wanted to mention it and encourage y'all to check that kind of stuff out, because I mean, yeah, like I believe Xi Jinping was just saying like houses are for living in, not for speculation. And it's like, duh. When we have so much money moving around, when we have way more than we need to meet everyone's basic needs, it's like, yeah, why are we letting this even happen? Why is homelessness even a possibility? Um anyway, carry on. Here's a cool post from Climate Defiance, which is a really neat little group, um, talking about how the World Meteorological Association released their annual greenhouse gas bulletin, which measured that carbon levels have reached um, levels not seen since 3 million years ago, where sea levels were 30 to 60 feet higher. So, when you go back to this, and when you go to this, there's still ice, but it's not a great trend. It notes that 1/10 of the human population live within 30 feet of sea level. So, it's like I was saying earlier with regard to the hurricanes. It's heartbreaking that every time these things happen, it's like that's then more resources that have to be spent going, getting around it happening rather than just addressing it in the first place. That's 10% of human, or yeah, 1/10 of humanity is going to have to, it's going to take some time and money and resources to transition, and that's money and time that should be invested now, right? But those at the reins, there's a very small minority of people are choosing to put people through this instead. Um, we could keep reading it if you'd like. I would encourage y'all to. Yeah, learning about climate feedback loops, huge. I don't recall ever really learning too much about it. I damn sure haven't seen anything on the news. So again, that's why I want to talk to y'all about this stuff because nobody, you don't see it unless you're like really going out of your way to look for it. And I know people are busy, so you know. Anyway, yeah. They point out too that we knew in the 70s and had the time to act then. Right now is the time that we have to mitigate to even get on track to back where we were in the 70s and navigate out of it. But yeah, it's not hopeless. We can do it. That's another reason why I want to talk to y'all because we can. That's the fact of the matter is that it's perfectly possible. So we shouldn't be doomed, despairing and whatnot. It's horrible that it's happening, but that should motivate us to fight that much harder for our neighbors and eventually ourselves. Because if this stuff's not on our doorstep right now, it's only a matter of time. Not only the climate stuff, but all of the ills of this imperialist system, which we'll continue talking about. This was a new one. Seeing that Fortune 500, which isn't just mainstream media, but like the business mainstream outlet, is saying we are essentially in a new gilded age as workers get laid off, CEOs and shareholders gobble up hundreds of billions in profit. And again, that goes not toward climate, not toward our communities. It's funneled away from us and regular working people and the people we love, the people who are not creating apocalypse. And instead, the people who are responsible for it are being rewarded from this arrangement. It's like beyond disgusting. Um, I know I talked about this already, but I just wanted to mention it again. The top 1% of Americans have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90% since I believe it's 1975. Eh, I don't know. Anyway, though, yeah, not good. Inequality is a big driver of the climate. So really, if we want to address inequality or the climate itself, we need to start with inequality first and foremost, which starts, you know, with policy, which is what I've been talking about. We need policy. Um, this is something I wanted to talk about along with a couple of these other ones because it shows, you know, if we're sitting on our hands, if we're expecting these people to give us this policy just out of the altruism of their hearts and the responsibility for mankind, then we are dreaming. Because our government currently is threatening the International Criminal Court under the Democrats. Trump's not even in the picture. Fascism's here, been here for years, came wearing red and blue. The ICC, yeah, I've talked about this before. It's crazy how this government is continuing to insist on behaving in front of the world stage. Pretty crazy. Um, yeah, there's a lot more to read about that, about the US's interactions with the ICC. Um, and yeah, again, would it humbly encourage everyone to check that out because I mean that's our taxes. That's our government. We should know what they're doing. And if our neighbors are struggling, we should know that they're being allowed to struggle instead of while our government's doing stuff like this. Um, there's something else in this regard I wanted to talk about specifically, but I can't quite recall. Anyway, we'll carry on. Um, here's at the UN. I believe this was at the COP16, the new kind of convention for what we're doing as we're moving forward. Current plans and policies will lead to global temperatures rising between 2.6 C and 3.1 C this century, a new report finds. So if we hit 3C, even 2C, that's like guaranteed death and displacement for a lot of people. And yeah, the establishment doesn't really seem too interested in any policy that reflects that. So, of course they don't care that our own neighbors are suffering. They don't care that their conflicts are causing the deaths of lots of civilians, not just in Gaza, but all around the uh what did they call it? I mean, there's the global south, but I forget the word. It was something periphery. Oh well. But yeah, really cool statistic. Most scientists are scared and terrified. Yeah, there's plenty of that kind of stuff coming out. Um, we'll just carry on. Here's a fun post. Kind of relates to why better policy is good. I told my dad that Sweden gives 240 days of paid parental leave to each parent when a baby is born and 480 days to single parents, and they can donate half of their days to a friend or family member to help with care. My dad asked who pays for that. I said the government. Taxes? He said, yeah, but how? And then I reminded him how much we spend on bombs just this year, and he went, oh. And I said, yeah, and we both got quiet. Another world is possible. And it's yeah, it's um cut and dry. Cut and dry. Um a lot of other good posts from this kind of this account here, Witches for Hope. They're always posting neat stuff, so would humbly recommend y'all check them out too. Here's Fidel Castro talking at the Earth Summit in '92. Um, really awesome little video. I would recommend y'all find it, check it out. Um, again, cut and dry. Socialism or barbarism. I dare pro-capitalists to tell us how exactly they will intend to address the inequality that's driving the climate crisis and the climate crisis itself. I'd love to hear it, frankly. um, but yeah, that's why they've spent tons and tons of money demonizing China and in the past demonizing the USSR because they knew that it meant an end to their way of life, and that's why, or they demonized Cuba as well. And meanwhile, they're actually leagues more responsible than the current Western status quo. I can't remember if I spoke about this already, but I mean, with regard to the USSR, just one example is I remember they had a particular calendar that they used to prevent overfishing. And meanwhile, we just go buck wild. We say profit over everything, not sustainable. We'll get to that shortly. Here's a post about Spain and the stuff going on. An entire year's worth of rain fell in the span of 8 hours. Yeah, it's climate defiance again. You should check it out. Organize when. Fossil fuel industry will only beat us if we let them. That's exactly right. Um, here's a fun statistic that you really don't see too many people talking about. Um, there are more slaves in the world currently than at the height of the transatlantic slave trade, 86% of which exist in the private sector. And if you don't believe it, go look it up because I did. I cross referenced. It's true. 86% of slavery in the private sector. How is the system defensible? Again, I beg a pro capitalist to tell me exactly how they plan to address something like that. It's it's like it's a feature, not a bug, because it's I could go on about it, but sorry, I was looking at something. But yeah, it's yeah, reprehensible, no justification, and yeah, the fact that not only are rulers currently our two choices are not even interested in talking about it, but instead having this whole spectacle with regard to the election while all this stuff's going on, while we're in the eve of climate apocalypse and everything. Disgusting, right? Here's another cool post talking about how homelessness encampment or homeless encampment sweeps are causing people to lose all sorts of their belongings. Here's just one: birth certificate, passport, storage keys, money. Set progress to saving up for a place back months. Yeah. Antibiotics, wedding rings, IDs. They say cruelty is the point. There's a lot to be examined there. Why are we treating people like this in the richest country in the history of the world? A lot to think about. In that regard, they talk about it here, actually. There's been an obvious political realignment, both parties offering comfort for neocons. You could argue this is about the same thing that was going on back in the 90s with Bill Clinton, right? Same deal. The Democrats were, making things comfy for the right. Same thing with Obama, noticing a pattern. But yeah, there's no meaningful political home for progressives and many voters of color. Yeah. This is from this account here. They post really cool stuff too, so I would humbly recommend it as well. Yeah. What a headline, right? Awesome, awesome society. Awesome incentives that it creates. Yeah. Cut and dry. Democrats don't exist to defend a progressive agenda. They exist to prevent its advancement. A good kind of summation for that is like the Republicans don't have anyone to the right of them. Like there's not. And then the Democrats don't entertain anybody to the left of them. So it's like, well, what choice is there? It's just right. Right? Um yeah, there's a guy, talking about voting third party. Opposed to GOP for 25 years, organizing, writing, yada yada. Until 2020, I voted blue and worked with top Dem politicians, but now I believe the Democratic Party is an obstacle to progress, and the two-party monopoly will never solve our problems. Encourage every voter to reject the system, yada yada. Yeah. I think better than just rejecting the vote, we should, organize our communities and materially challenge them. That's what I've been talking about. But yeah, starting somewhere is good, I guess. Um, oh yeah, here's the uh, uh, lawsuit claims ICE withheld 300 million in bond payments from immigrants. Remember when we were talking about no more kids in cages, abolish ICE? Yeah, they have even more funding and power now than they did under Trump. And they're stealing from people. The West. The best of the West. Yeah. Yeah, the US and Israel, once again, the only people voting to encourage the blockade on Cuba. Democracy is, in fact, not on the ballot. No brainer. This is some insight from W.E. Du Bois, which he was writing in 1956. It scales perfectly still because we still have not materially challenged things since then. I believe that democracy has so far disappeared in the United States that no two evils exist. There is but one evil party with two names. And he says, democracy is dead in the US, yet there is still nothing to replace real democracy. Drop the chains, then, that bind our brains. Drive the money changers from the seats of the cabinet and the halls of Congress. Yeah, he was down as fuck. If y'all are not familiar with him, definitely check out everything he was writing about, along with Eugene V. Debs, two just really awesome brains from back in the day regarding, in everything they were critiquing is still pretty much relevant. Um, Here's another really awesome statistic. Biden and Kamala promised to cancel student debt. Student debt is now a large number. Is that billion? Million? Yeah. Wait, I don't know. I can't. That's such a big number. My dumbass brain doesn't even want to fucking read it. That's 100,000 million. Yeah, 51 billion. That's pretty epic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 120,000 people displaced in the last 10 days. Again, the parallels with the climate stuff is tragic. It's pitiful, frankly, that we don't have anybody that is taking this stuff seriously that's at the reins of decision making executive stuff like policy or with regard to the economy. Like we desperately need it. It's so obvious how much we need it. And yet they're just insisting on spectacle and they're profoundly out of touch. Here's a cool post I saw just earlier, I guess yesterday. As a historian who had spent months in the National Archives, I say not lightly that this archivist should be fired. And why would he say that? Because someone in the one of the museum has removed references to Martin Luther King, Japanese internment, Native Americans, union organizers, and birth control because presenting American history honestly would make Republicans uncomfortable. It's right there in the Wall Street Journal. Again, mainstream stuff. Visitors shouldn't feel confronted. Again, happening under the Democrats. It's honestly, again, though, they're kind of telling on themselves about exactly what we should be looking into and really getting up to speed on. You know, because Martin Luther King was very critical of our economic system also and was a proponent of socialism. What a coincidence. Native Americans have been very critical of the way that we've been doing things, especially since the 70s in regard to the environment. The union organizers speaks for itself. Birth control speaks for itself. Our fucking, people can't access what they need. It's crazy. Um, Yeah, this is already half an hour long and I'm only halfway through. All right. This one, quick one. Wildlife populations reaching points of no return. Living Planet report shows global wildlife populations have dropped by an average of 73% since 1970. Loss of one species can create a cascade of disasters. Yeah. We must listen to science and take action to avoid collapse, President Susanna Mohammed said at COP16. Yeah. Seeing again, like, do we even have COP16 news coverage? I haven't seen it. It's like, dude, we are so screwed here in the West. The priorities are just disgusting. And it's obvious, too, because, the media is owned by the rich. The policy is for the rich. Of course, they're not going to report on things that is inconvenient to them. And that's why I feel like I need to talk about this with y'all. Um, Here's another just wonderful point from that Priscilla account again. The genocide in Gaza has produced more CO2 emissions than the annual emissions of 135 countries combined. We cannot separate the acceleration of climate catastrophe from the environmental cost of Israel's barbarism. Zionism is not only destroying Gaza, it's destroying our planet. War in general. Why do we have wars still? When we have $50 trillion relegated, it's like, why? For what reason? And when you begin to investigate that, everything else becomes so clear. And again, that's why we need to organize, because they won't let us vote on this stuff. If we could have voted on this stuff, it would have ended in as soon as it began. Because it was obvious it was what it was all the time. Um, and yet, here we are. So that's why we need to go further than voting. Um, yeah, this one's just talking about how financial anxiety that young people are living through is not normal. The paycheck to paycheck kind of life, monetizing hobbies, hustling, glorifying precarious work conditions. Yeah, dude. Like, people have always needed to work, but there is a very stark difference between how the work has been organized so far and yep. Anyway, here's another thing came out today. Billionaires like Musk and Bezos need just 90 minutes to match your lifetime carbon footprint. Between jets, yachts, investments, and destructive companies, billionaires are speed running the apocalypse. Every billionaire is a policy failure. Couldn't have put it better. Please check this account out too. Really good stuff. Earthly education. But yeah. Also, yeah, Papua New Guinea was over here boycotting the UN at COP16 because they're calling it a waste of time, full of empty promises from big polluters. You think about the last decade, yeah, pretty much. These bastards have never had the intention to actually materially challenge their status quo because they love getting rich from it. So we have to do that. That's our role in the world we're in as the class we are. That's what, again, I can't stress enough. I want to talk to y'all about this stuff because that's exactly what we got to do. It's unfortunate, maybe, that you could, that's the world we're in. But the only thing we're really missing out on is a status quo that was already rotten to the core. We actually are fortunate because we get to participate in building something better that works for all people that isn't going to result in apocalypse, right? It's an exciting time. It's good that we have the opportunity to address these things. Um, just some more neat, neat articles, neat little deals. Yeah, here we go. European Union's greenhouse gas emissions dropped by 8% in 2023. Why aren't we keeping up with that? You know, I have been seeing a lot of stuff about beef production and how that is a huge issue for that. So again, we could have policy there. We could have a carbon tax easily. But yep. Just another nice little thing. Every human population has a small percentage of sociopaths, people who just don't give a fuck about others. Egalitarian human societies develop strong mechanisms to curb and expel them due to the danger they pose to all. Neoliberalism and capitalism promote them to the very top, right? Like, why are we rewarding people who are, I'll just toot my own horn here. They're rewarding people who are too ignorant or too evil to consider externalities, right? And we'll get into that later too. Um, and there's that again. It's pretty much the same thing. Here's another thing, while these billionaires are busy destroying the world, what else have they been doing with their wealth? Well, they've been turning around and consolidating and oppressing us. Billionaires and their families have spent nearly 2 billion on the presidential election so far. Most of it has gone to Republicans. Awesome. 538 people in Congress and a grand total of 5 signed a letter asking the president why he refuses to follow the law. Here are the signatories, definitely check these guys out. Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, hope I said it right, have been writers forever. Cori Bush particularly has been really awesome. But yeah, why are we having to write letters to our own president asking them why they don't follow their own laws? Dude. Like, yeah, maybe we should restructure some things. Um, this one I opened just to read. I didn't mean to talk about it. I wanted to send it to my boss actually. But I guess since I still have it here, check out this page. It's really cool. um, yeah, and here's another thing. The problem with democracy. The people would never vote to pollute their own rivers just to make a boss rich. Yeah. There's some words from Gustavo Gutierrez, who recently passed away. Another incredible figure. He combined theology, Christianity and whatnot, with Marxist thinking, which I think goes hand in hand and is really awesome. It has a lot of really good quotes like this one. Definitely check that stuff out if you're not familiar. The philosophy is called liberation theology. It's really awesome. Here's another thing relating to livestock that I just wanted to share real quickly. 83% of agricultural land on Earth is used to feed livestock, even though livestock only provide 18% of humanity's calories. Kind of interesting. Also, this person is a little critical of it. I do think that there is space to be critical of beef farming. I don't think we should throw it all out because I've read there's regenerative ways to handle it. Um, But yeah, let's keep carrying on before I run out of space on my hard drive. 4 indigenous values that would transform our economic system. Just awesome stuff I wanted to share. 1, reciprocity, the recognition that we are all connected and interdependent on one another. Obvious, but yet we have this stupid ass Ayn Rand kind of thought that, perversion that's going on in this society where everyone's not thinking that this is the nature of reality. But yeah, there's some good comments here sharing their thoughts on the matters. 2, sufficiency. Rather than infinite growth, a focus on having enough and distributing what's not needed. Collectivity, communal care, and sharing ownership rather than individual benefit. And stewardship, caring for the land and its resources, ensuring that they are protected for future generations. This one's huge because if we just did that, life is inherently, like all life on Earth, inherently regenerative, restorative. All we had to do is steward the function of life, so to speak. And it does it on its own. It's exciting that we get to live in this time because we have the ability to facilitate that, right? Like we are here on earth as a part of it. It's not that humans are a disease or humans are a cancer on earth. It's that we are a part of earth that is just as much a part of that inherent regenerativeness as any other part. But the thing is, we have these institutions that are the actual issue that are getting in the way of that and making it extractive and exploitative rather than these values, because that's what makes money. Anyway, there's a lot more to be said on that matter. I don't know. Check out this page. It's really cool. Um, and, just indigenous philosophy in general. Last thing, pretty much, that I wanted to talk about is related to it's kind of what I was touching on earlier about how, you know, the system is so screwed how it rewards the worst of us. Corporate greed is DuPont making 1.62 billion in profits this year, spending a billion on stock buybacks, paying its CEO 20 million and being fined only 480,000 for the release of a chemical that causes leukemia. It causes 508,000 to treat just one child with leukemia in America. So I commented, perfect example of why success in this status quo is just taking advantage of how externalities are not considered by the market, and also they use um, the infrastructure that everyone else pays for. But I didn't even mention that here. But yeah, it's insane that this level of irresponsibility is rewarded. How irresponsible is DuPont exactly? And all the people doing forever chemicals. Let's see here. Removing PFAS from the environment at current emission rates would cost more than the global GDP, which is, I believe, how much money? $106 trillion dollars. So, okay, yeah, it made a couple $1 billion of profit for this one company, but it cost the world 106 trillion. This doesn't even make sense on paper. Everyone's always like, "Oh, capitalism makes or communism makes sense on paper, but it doesn't in reality." It's like, bro, this stuff doesn't even make sense at all. We're failing. This is just a blatant failure. It's time to put it to rest. It's informed by thought that started 300 years ago and it largely hasn't changed too much really. And we're seeing how egregiously foolish all of that is. And then the very last thing is something from this cool page called Abolish Time. They write these neat little kind of short essays that are just awesome. And I wanted to read this one as a nice way to wrap up everything I've been yapping about so far. So it goes, in our resolve to survive the sheer lethality of white supremacy, we reject compromise, which that already just goes so hard because that seems to be Kamala Harris's whole approach is, oh, we can compromise with the fascists. Yeah, that's fine. We'll compromise with everyone can just get along while we drive the planet into extinction and more war. And let all our neighbors suffer and die until it's on your doorstep. Nice. Um, we will not forsake those who should still be alive today and romanticize complicity into something courageous and freeing. Those of us who continue taking precautions have been largely exiled from society. I can only imagine that's in regard to coronavirus, which is, real. The more we push each other to act collectively without an understanding of our varied access needs and the different kinds of struggles we each face, as some intersectionality, the more we sabotage our attempts to get free with inaccessibility. We've seen the damage that mistaking belief systems for adequate care networks can inflict on our lives. There's, a call for real material policy. Blaming the primary oh, excuse me. The primary targets of fascism for not voting is more acceptable to people who can't begin to fathom the totality of horrors global fascism inflicts upon us. Fascism paves its own future with billions of compromises that will see you making peace with the very antithesis to liberation. Again, go so hard. And if you know history, right? Hitler's rise to power, it was paved with billions of compromises. It was, check out the book called the Making of an Atlantic Ruling Class or something like that. I think that's the title. Um, but yeah, it just goes into like it's the parallels are unbelievable. Like it almost seems like we like to look at Hitler as like almost like a unique kind of evil. Oh, it's the worst in history. It absorbs all the sins of the West. It's we'll never do that again. Yet we're I don't know. If you know what's going on, and if you knew what was going on then, yeah. And if you don't, read. Spend an afternoon or two. Like this is the rest of our lives, right? This is the rest of the lives of every person on Earth. Every single person is beholden to these climate issues and the wars and whatnot, and also the policy, causing the economic system where one unforeseen accident, will take away your home or something like that. Like there's no good reason. They're keeping people in these precarious situations. Anyway, should there ever be a generation of people who have never borne witness to genocide and oppression, they will exist because we stopped excusing capitulation to and apologism for fascism. They will understand the turning point in our trajectory during this mass extinction event was carved out by those who were once exiled, not exalted in an era that hungered for the world's destruction. I am inspired by those who deny fascists the satisfaction of seeing us give up on getting free. Hell yeah, dude. Anyway, so that's the whole thing. Sorry it was 45 minutes long, but there's a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. I just feel like all this stuff is so hugely important as we move forward. So if you watched it all, thanks. I'm giving you a high five through the screen right now. Much love to everyone as we move forward. Best wishes and Godspeed. Oh yeah, and check out the Black Socialists in America and what they have to say about building dual power in our communities and organizing toward the general strike. All right, bye.